think first and foremost, you lead with your actions first and not your words. So you're putting yourself in a much better situation to have a leadership role on the team if you're one of the hardest working players out there. A lot of times in youth hockey, I feel like coaches just give the C or the A to the best player, which isn't necessarily reinforcing the best things, even if that player is, really skilled and talented, but maybe they're only about themselves or, whatever. I feel like just the work ethic side of things is really important. And then, like, honestly, does this person just care about the thing on the front of the jersey more than the thing on the back? That for me is everything. You got to be playing for something bigger than yourself, and understanding that, and leading through actions of this is what's best for the team. That goes a long way.
That was Topher Scott, former NCAA Division I captain at Cornell with the Big Red. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolak, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolak, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hello and welcome back, or welcome to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolak. I am your host, Jason Podolak, and today we are in for a treat because we have Topher Scott on the program. For those of you who are podcast enthusiasts across the hockey landscape, you may already be familiar with Topher because he is the co-host of one of the most popular podcasts on hockey in North America, and that's the Hockey Think Tank podcast, where he's a co-host with Jeff Lovecchio. Some of you may remember my conversation with Jeff Lovecchio as a guest here on the pod a few months back, where we talked about personal training and a bunch of things which Jeff specializes in. And yeah, Jeff and I got along great, and it turned out that they decided to have me on their podcast as a guest, and that was when I was able to meet with Topher. Topher's a fantastic dude. We really got along great on the podcast. He said, I think you're my new best friend because we seem to align on so many concepts and philosophies. And one of the things that really intrigued me about him, and one of the reasons why I wanted to get Topher on my pod, was his size, which sounds so simple, but he's 5'6". And he was the captain of a USHL team, and he was the captain of Cornell, and he did go on to play pro. And just lately in my ecosystem here, I've been having a lot of conversations with parents and with players who are, let's call them undersized or late developers. And so I said to Topher, I'm like, boy, I'm sure you are a wealth of knowledge and would really benefit my audience if we could come on and we could have a discussion about that and how maybe we can reframe the size issue and just have a discussion along that. So this conversation goes well beyond being an undersized hockey player, but it was one of the reasons why I wanted to have Topher on. Experienced a lot of success at a very high level, despite a vertically challenged scenario at 5'6". So this is a great interview. Really tons of fun for me. Topher tells a great story. A lot of the things that he talks about are story based. I'd give him a compliment on that towards the end of the discussion, just because he's engaging and he's able to tie in past experiences and stories that he's had with relevant information to today's player. So yeah, had a ton of fun with him. He stands for a lot of things that I stand for. I mean, he's about the long game. He's about just enjoying the process. He's about keeping hockey simple, keeping hockey local, keeping hockey community based. So there's a lot of things that he's out there trying to do, and him with the Hockey Think Tank podcast is trying to help associations provide the right culture to their players, the right development model, focusing on the right things, which seems has to have gone astray in some areas. So I love this conversation. He's one of those guys that I could have a conversation with every day, it seems like. It was easy. It was fun, and like I said, very story driven with Topher. So I will stop talking about Topher. Just let you know that he did play, as I said, hockey at very high level. Chicago Steel, USHL, the best junior league in the U.S. He went on to Cornell with the Big Red, Cornell University NCAA, where I believe they won a championship there as well, and wore the C in both places. Went on to play some pro in the ECHL and the CHL. So definitely has his own hockey background and acumen, and a good resume to back all the stuff that he's done since he retired as a player, which is got into coaching at Cornell and other places, and now, like I said, he's helping players and associations develop athletes and have the right development model to support their well-being. So he appreciates the holistic side of development, as do I. So let's get Topher here and our discussion straight at you. So without further ado, Topher Scott with the Hockey Think Tank podcast. Thanks for joining. Okay, here we are live from Chicago. We have Topher Scott on the show. Welcome to the program, Toph.
Happy to be here, Jason. Let's let her rip. Here we go.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. It was fun for those of you who are obviously my guests and listeners. I was a guest on the Hockey Think Tank, where Toph is co-host there. And anyways, it was an awesome conversation. I found out a little bit more about Topher that I didn't know, and I was like, you know what? I think if you're willing, it would be amazing to come on for my audience. I think we'd probably have a lot to offer. So that's where the relationship started, and you were kind enough to join. So once again, I appreciate you taking my invite.
Yeah, pumped to be on. And yeah, that was an awesome conversation that we had on ours.
Sweet.
It's always great to just riff with hockey guys and talk about hockey stories, and then, give some advice that of things that we've been through, that can help people coming up and stuff. And so you have such a great story, and it was really cool to get you on there, to let you tell it. And I think we learned a lot from it. It was great.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, you had some good feedback from it?
Yeah, ton
Awesome.
of great feedback. Cool. For sure.
Yeah, and I did not mean to make this an advertisement about me, but for those of you who are listening, like, obviously we're not talking about me very much. If you are interested in my story, like the Hockey Think Tank is an awesome podcast, first of all, if you're not familiar with it. So go check them out. And you can check out my interview on there. That was probably released about a month.
About a month ago, I want to say. Sure.
Anyways, yeah, that was a lot of fun. And yeah, so I found out during that you were a hell of a player in your own right, and had some uniqueness about you in the idea of your vertically challengedness. Let's put it that way. So Topher, how tall are you for real, not on the hockey card?
So on the hockey card, I'm 5'6". Off the hockey card, 5'4". And actually, there's a funny story that goes with that. So, when I was 17, my first draft year, how central scouting comes in and they do the heights and the weights and everything, right? So, they have the ruler that's taped on the wall, and you go up and you stand with your heels against the wall. And it started at 5'6". Like, it didn't start at 5'4". So I remember as a 17-year-old going up to the wall and like knowing I'm not even going to hit it. Right. And so I put my heels against and my butt against the wall. And the guy just kind of looks at me and he kind of smiles and laughs. He goes, "Hey kid, we'll give you 5'6". And I was like, all right, sweet. So in the program, I've been 5'6" ever since.
Yeah, I know the program is wild. Okay, so that's a wild story. I love that. I remember you sharing that on the Think Tank. So 5'4", and to back your story up, so Central Scouting came to our program there in Spokane, and what I was worried about at the time, I was 6'2", but I thought that I was too skinny, or I was like, I got to be heavier. So we had our whatever, our hockey underwear on, and so I grabbed a 10-pound plate and tried to shove it in my shorts with my jock on. Yep. So it was like hidden. So I was 10 pounds heavier than I was supposed to be in that regard too. We're always trying to inflate what we think we need, but
plates or pucks or yeah. I've heard it all.
How are you from a weight standpoint? Like at 17 and even now, like was that your full size at 17 years old?
Yeah, I was kind of an early mature, like never hit the growth spurt, unfortunately, like
Hmm.
never grew up.
Yeah.
But yeah, around that time I was probably, I don't know, 150, 155,
Okay.
as I got to college and started playing there. My max weight was probably 165, 170 right around then.
Okay.
So, yeah, was always kind of a stocky kid. Um, thank God,
Yeah.
because at my height that was probably necessary. But I also was pretty lucky to be a little bit of an early mature too, to be able to withstand some of the physicality of the game. I'm actually a pretty big believer that like kids that don't physically mature early, it's almost like an advantage. Because what you see in hockey, I don't know if you see it by you guys too, but like a lot of times these kids who mature early, they're reinforced from a positive standpoint to just skate in a straight line and score goals. Because they're just like bigger and stronger and faster than everybody, and they don't really learn how to play the game. Um, but the kids who don't mature physically early, like they got to learn the game a little bit more. They got to figure out some tricks on how to be successful throughout the game without having to impose their physical strength and things like that. And so I always felt like the later matures almost had a little bit more hockey sense because they've had to figure the game out and survive a
Hmm.
little bit.
Yeah.
And that's where like in youth coaching, we talk to the coaches all the time, like, don't even if a kid skates in a straight line and scores a goal at mites, like let's reinforce like team play because at
Yeah.
some point people are going to catch up to them, and you
Hmm.
can't use your physical skill as much. So a little bit of a tangent to that, but it's
No,
something we talk about
I
all
agree.
the time.
I think it's a great talking point and something that I have chatted about as well. I've been on a little bit of a late birthday kind of focus because just of how it all works out, how especially in the WHL level of the draft that I've been looking at where it's not represented proportionately,
Yeah,
like the last quarter of the birth year. And it just makes sense from the standpoint of these players aren't less talented, they're just less developed. 10, 11, 12 months at the age of 13 is a long time,
big
right? At
time.
the age of 14 is a long time. So, what does that mean in the big picture? What does that mean to development? And is there a silver lining for any of these younger guys that maybe might not be physically at the level of some of the early matures? And, from my standpoint and my philosophy, I want to empower people as much as we can, right? With the idea of, hey, there is an opportunity and there is a chance. And if we change our perspective of this, maybe there can be some empowerment in the process, and to your point, I think one of those messages can be just that, yes, you may not be as strong right now and you may not be as fast and you may not be getting all the accolades of some of these big, strong, fast kids. But if you can look at it from a standpoint of, hey, I need to learn angles to get into to protect pucks differently. I need to be able to move pucks past people and then get open, find open space. I need to learn these aspects of the game. If we can actually embrace that, I do believe what you're saying is true. If that growth spurt does come and if we are able to catch up physically, we should have a higher hockey IQ in the process.
Yeah, 100%. And it goes both ways too. Like you talk about some of those things that are really important for the kids to learn for the youth, as far as their own player development, but then you also think about it from like a scouting perspective too, and an evaluative perspective. Like, let's not get so infatuated with the kid who just grew faster than everybody else, who's just, physically dominant because
Yeah.
that's what it is. Let's spend a little bit more time and effort looking at the nuances of the game, the amount of times that kids touch the puck, where they are on the ice, the amount of plays that they make, their compete, their will. Maybe they are a smaller player, and they go in and maybe they don't win the battle, but they sure as heck gave it their all in the battle, things
Yeah.
like that, as well. And that goes all the way down to, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year olds.
Yeah.
And again, that's not to throw shade on some of the older, more physically mature kids. Um, but like looking at the intangibles of things and making sure that we're not leaving kids behind who, if we look at things through a different lens, they might end up being a better hockey player at the end of the day, even though physically they're not quite there. And I know in junior hockey, that's a big thing now from a scouting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of questions that I get from junior hockey scouts is like, how tall's their dad? How tall's their mom? Like,
Yeah.
because they're not physically mature yet. And so they're looking at the intangibles and things like that. And then pairing that with where they think size wise the kid is going to be and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but the one thing that we always encourage, like I said, the coaches is like, let's make sure we're rewarding the right things at the youngest of ages as it relates to what actually is going to translate to the next level. Might to squirt to Pee-wee, Pee-wee to Bantam, or I should say Adam, novice to Adam. Let's reinforce great competitiveness. Let's reinforce great team play, the ability to pass the puck. Like we don't, as youth hockey coaches, we don't stress passing nearly enough. For me, that's the biggest thing outside of maybe skating that translates to the next level is the ability to get to spots to get the puck and the ability to find people, when they're open to. That's what we would call hockey sense, which is really, really important, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's funny just kind of going through all the iterations of what development means and, what things kind of translate as you get older and the way that we kind of evaluate players and what we're trying to develop in them, I think is changing for the good. It's a little bit less, are they big and can they shoot? It's a little bit more, can they process? Can they understand? And that,
Yeah.
like we were both talking about, that can happen as a very physically immature kid.
The intangible that you're talking about now, I think it might be more relevant or prevalent or show up more in a player that, let's call them, is undersized or a late mature. And those intangibles for me would be the courage, the bravery, the competitiveness, because it is harder for them. And I think that's a real thing. Josh Doan, who I had on, who's your father, Shane Doan, who, Hall of Famer, big 230 pounder. Josh was a late guy to the party when it came to growing. And he said he was like legitimately scared on the ice, right? Because of what could happen and the way he would get thrown around in a corner. So he had to manufacture kind of the mindset required for him to be effective. I think it's more relevant for those players because it's going to show up more. Like, how do we encourage, or how do you see like that growth of the player from those intangibles, and how can we support them with that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like I think about it a lot. Like I think one of my probably two best assets when I was a player growing up was my hockey sense and my competitiveness. Like both of them, I had little man syndrome.
Yeah.
Like put me in the corner with the biggest guy. We'll see who comes out with the puck.
Yeah.
And so I think about it like I don't know if I achieve what I achieve in this game or learn the life skills that are helping me to be successful in life after hockey if I'm 6'2", because it would have been easier for me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been cut a couple times when I shouldn't have been cut. I would have maybe, got recognized or drafted in the NHL or whatever, had I not been my size. Like, I don't know, but I had to work harder, because of that thing. And I had to get, be more resilient and more mentally tough and stuff. And so I think really like a lot of it comes down to the life skills, honestly. We talked a little bit about the hockey sense and the competitiveness and things like that, but the life skills that you kind of get from being in a bit of an underdog, and just having to earn it maybe a little bit more. And that's what I think, like, we say all the time to kids, like the best players at 10 aren't always the best at 12. And the best players at 15 aren't always the best at 18. And a lot of that comes down to those intangible life skills of learning how to kind of get through the tough stuff. And when you've been told you're so good for so long, sometimes kids start to believe that and they forget that like it's hard work. It's not just talent, but it's like hard work that gets you there. And with just the way that youth hockey is in terms of how young kids are getting recruited and being told these kinds of things, like it's easy to kind of get complacent. And that's where the life skills that maybe some of these younger underdeveloped kids have to learn just to survive and to be on the same level as those kids, they start to pass those kids because they've got that inner drive and that mental toughness and that resilience from having to earn it and earn it and earn it all the time. And again, we're all a product of our own experiences, and that certainly was mine. But, being a college hockey coach and seeing a lot of kids from, 15, 16 years old up until they retire, I think that's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
So that messaging, I like it. I think I like it. But can we break that down? Because I know there's players right now listening, and that's what I said to you as far as the precursor to us talking, is that there's going to be small players listening, whether they're fully mature small players or whether they're younger youth players that haven't gone through puberty yet, and they're potentially struggling with the idea of what I just said. Maybe they're feeling like Josh Doan. They're actually a little bit scared. They want to be good, but they don't know how to be good. They don't know how to overcome some of these things that they're feeling inside. Can we frame this to them as that you are an underdog and it's okay to be an underdog, and that is where you're going to find the resiliency to move forward? Like, is that part of it, or is there even more to it than that?
Honestly, I wouldn't even say it's okay to be an underdog. I think it's an advantage to be an underdog. I really do, because you really do have to learn those life skills quicker, than the other people who've had maybe more success than you've had, throughout their upbringing and throughout their journey. And the story I always like to tell the kids, and it kind of resonates with them. When I was 16 years old, I got invited to what's called the USA Hockey Select Festivals. And basically USA Hockey brings in the top 200 kids in the country for this showcase festival kind of thing. And from that, they pick a team to go overseas to play in the Five Nations tournament. And when I was 16, I got invited to go, and I always wanted to play for my country. I thought it'd be the coolest thing ever. And I'd go to the camp and I play really well. And I was the fourth leading scorer in the entire camp out of 200. And so I'm like, man, I'm going to make this team. This is incredible. But as it has it, I did not make the team. And I remember just, it's such like one of those memories that's etched inside your head. Like, I found out in the locker room that I didn't make it because everybody who did kind of got an envelope and a contract, hey, you made the team, and I didn't get one. But as I was leaving the locker room, the head coach of Team USA comes in, and he was actually looking for me. And he's like, hey, is Topher in here? And I kind of raised my hand. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, hey, I'd like to talk to you in the hallway. And I said, okay. And so he brings me out in the hallway and he starts telling me about, hey, you played really well this week. You made a lot of plays. You competed. You deserve to make the team, blah, 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 blah. But, we're Team USA. And this was in late 90s, early 2000s, whatever. We're Team USA. Our identity, we're going to be big and tough, and we want to intimidate out these European teams that we're playing. And so you played really well. You deserve to make the team. But because of your size, we're not going to take you. You're an alternate. And so just complete blow. It's just complete gut punch, right? And so I'm pissed off, and I go and I grab my bag, and it was in Minnesota. We live in Chicago. My dad drove me up there. So we get in the car, and I'm throwing myself a pity party in the car. Like, this isn't fair. I can't believe it, blah, blah, blah. And I'll never forget it. My dad, thank God for my dad, man. Thank God for my dad. He kind of looks at me and he's like, basically like, are you done complaining? I was like, well, what do you mean? This is BS. Like, I can't believe this happened. He's like, yeah, I understand, but like, are you done? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, Toph, here's the facts. Okay. You're 5'4". Like, the people you're competing against for those spots are half a foot taller than you. You have to be that much better than everybody else just to be even. It's just a fact. It sucks, but it's a fact. All right. And if you want to be that much better than everybody else, you better work that much harder than everybody else just to be even. And so he goes, look, we can sit here and we can whine and we can complain and we can think about how life's not fair, or we can do something about it. What's more beneficial, to sit here and sulk
Yeah.
about how life's not fair, or let's get to work. Like, let's make sure this never happens again. And that's where I feel like, as adults, like, our job is not to enable sulking. Our job is not to enable, and there's a time for a nice big hug when things don't go your way. There's no question for that. But like, what are you going to do about it? Like, that question, I think, legitimately fundamentally changed my life, because that summer I worked so hard, and all I can think about was that never happening again. And it was I have had a lot of success in the game, and that moment is a big reason why. It's a big reason why. So get your adversity in, get your rejection in. It's good for you if you choose to see it that way.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't see it that way. A lot of people, it's easier to sulk, it's easier to make excuses and feel sorry for yourself. You don't really have to put any effort in to do that. But like, if you want to be successful and you want to pass some other people, it's good to get rejected. I think it's good. It's good to get cut in a certain, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. I got cut a couple times in my life, and I think it was the best things that ever happened to me. And I don't know if I've had the success if I don't.
I love, yeah, that's what a great story. I'm glad you shared that. The determining factor, like that the separation from the event and what we decide it means is critical.
Yeah.
Right, whether you're a hockey player or whether you're going through life and your wife leaves you, or whatever thing happens, whatever the event is, it's raining outside. What do you decide that means? And to your point, you decided with the help of your dad that meant that you now had more clarity on your situation, and it resulted in you recognizing that you needed to work your ass off and you had to have an amazing attitude while you were doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
And life is all about choices. It's all about choices. Like, one thing I always try to tell kids, like, you have so much more control over your life and your journey and your career than you think you do. Because whatever happens, what's more important, the things that happen to us or the way that we choose to see the things that happen to us? And the harder choice is to take a positive out of everything. How can this help me and how can I get to work? The
Mhm.
easier choice to make is to pout and sulk and make excuses. But like, nothing great ever happened on the first try, I don't think. Typically, like, you look at millionaire, billionaire entrepreneurs, you look at so many of these people that make the highest levels of sport. One of the stats, Jason, that I absolutely love, and I say it all the time in my team building with kids, is like 87% of the players that played in the NHL last year in the 23-24 season had to play in the AHL. 87% of the players that played in the NHL last year played in the AHL at some point in their pro career. Well, what does that mean? That means that almost 9 out of 10 players that played in the NHL, what happened to them? They got sent down. They got cut. They were told they weren't good enough. Go work on your game before you come back up. And to me, that's an absolutely astounding stat, because when I used to think of an NHL hockey player, I would think of skill, right? Like, these skill and talent, and the highlights on TSN and YouTube and stuff. And now, after understanding this stat, when I think of an NHL hockey player, I think of grit. I think of resilience. And yeah, there's going to be a couple of the Crosbys and the McKinnons and the Ovechkins that never have to play a game in the AHL. They're just that good. Most players, yourself included, like, it's a ride, and it's
Yeah.
full of ups and downs and twists and turns and adversity and resilience and learning how to freaking manage all that stuff mentally, emotionally, physically. And I think, like, I'm also like, I'm really into human development and like the psychology of things. And one of the terms that a lot of psychologists are using nowadays is reframing. Like, how can you reframe this situation in your head to turn it into something that can actually help you moving forward, whatever that situation is? And I think the more that we can do that, and the more that we can teach kids to do that, like, okay, what's the situation? What's the choice we're going to make here on how we're going to see it? How are we going to reframe this where it can help us? Like, ultimately, that might be our most important job as coaches and as adults when we're working with our kids. And that's even hard to do as an adult. Human nature, it's a lot easier to be negative than it is to be positive. And so, yeah, I think, those little intangibles that we've been talking about, how can we find a positive in every situation and use it to make us better?
Yeah, and recognizing that there's a choice. I find that that's one of the biggest perspective changes with the players that I work with, is allowing them the opportunity to see that. Because I think the majority of us are on autopilot in some capacity, with their day
Yeah.
and with their responses. They're emotional, we feel things, and we just go about it. The aspect that really intrigues me about personal development is just that, recognizing that we have a choice in different areas, and trying to show that to young athletes, I think, can be very, very empowering. Because when you do face a problem, if our default now downloaded operating system tells us where's the solution, that's a way different thing to think about than like being stuck in the problem, and in this thing that we want to avoid, or that we're resistant to, or that we feel sorry for ourselves about. We automatically go to, how is this helping? How's this working for me? Why is this presented to me in this moment that is going to help something? which is like exactly what you talked about with that getting cut. I mean, that could have wrecked you. You could have thought the whole thing was unfair. The system's rigged. It's not for me, right? I picked the wrong sport. You decided to have another option there, and you found a way out, which empowered you to feel that you were in control. Like, that's the message that I want to get. And you hit on that earlier, is, the idea that you have way more control than a lot of people recognize, and especially younger athletes out there, is show them the path where they can feel empowered. And when you are able to recognize yourself making new choices in those moments, that's where I get on my coaching call. That's where people have the biggest smile on their face. They broke an old pattern of responding to something in a certain way, and they recognized in the moment that they were able to pivot, to be courageous, to reset from that mistake, to recognize it didn't mean what they originally thought it was supposed to mean, and they showed up differently. Like, that is a pretty cool thing to feel good about. Just going to take a short break from my podcast with Topher Scott to talk to you guys about the UMH 68, which is super exciting for me. It's an expanding brand underneath Up My Hockey. The UMH 68 is an invitational only experience for youth hockey players in the Western provinces of Canada. So yes, I'm sorry if you're listening from the States. This doesn't include you at this time, but it may be coming to an area near you in the future. But as of right now in 2025, we are hosting events in British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And we are targeting the minor bantam age group as well as the major peewee age group. So in Alberta, we are going to be talking to and inviting 2012 born players. In Saskatchewan, we're going to be inviting 2012 born players. And in Manitoba, we are inviting 2011 born players. BC will be doing both 2012s and 2011s. And this experience is designed to attract the top 68 players in the province, where we bring everyone together for a developmental weekend, an educational weekend, and a highly competitive weekend where you get to play against the other best on best in the province. Super exciting. We've done it 2 years in a row in British Columbia, to rave reviews from those who have participated. Parents, not often do you pay money for something that you thank people for afterwards. I know, I'm a hockey parent. I know that this happens time and time again, where you go to a spring tournament, or you go here or you go there, and you invest money in it. And rarely do you have such an extraordinary experience that you think to send an email to the host or the organizer thanking them for the event. And I say this as gratefully and as humbly as possible, but there is an over 50% rate of emails coming through my inbox from parents who are taking the time to thank me for the experience that their player had over the weekend. It's super, super exciting for me to have such an impact on the parents and on the players with what we are providing with the UMH 68. It is beyond hockey. It is underneath the umbrella of Up My Hockey, which is the holistic development of the athlete to be the best hockey player that they can be. And that philosophy is entrenched in the weekend. We take care of these players. We treat them like pros. We offer workshops for the players and the parents, meaning across all boards. I do a mindset workshop, which has been very well received, talking about mindset and when it comes to athletics and how it can make a difference for them in their hockey careers. Last year, we had on Vernon Vipers co-coach talking about the BCHL pathway. We had in a physical training component, which we combine with some player testing about why they're testing, what they can do to get better, how they compare to their peer group. And we also had in a player agent, a player representative, talking about that pathway, what purposes they serve at these younger ages, when you should get one, if you need one, what to look for. So the idea here is, yes, we are going to play hockey at the UMH 68. And yes, that is the focus. And yes, we take care of that 110% with stop time, 60-minute games, 2 ice cleans per game. We have trainers on set. We have coaches with NHL experience, or coaches that are still involved in the game at high levels, so you can get the exposure and the education from those players on those people on the bench. And And yeah, and it's the best on best experience. So the hockey is absolutely fantastic. No early morning games, no late night games. We take care of the athletes in the way that they can sleep and eat. And then we also have the educational component. We also take care of the players when it comes to their dressing room experience. Their gear gets to stay in the dressing room for the entire weekend. So you're not bringing that gear back to the hotel and having to air it out. It stays where it is. They have stalls that are dedicated to them. We have a player banquet that's dedicated just to the players, where the coaches get to address the players and speak to them, where we have reverse a raffle draw where they're winning prizes and we're educating them in the process. So, geez, I mean, the list honestly goes on, and it's been so well received, and I'm so excited to expand. And if you are someone that lives in the Western provinces, that you have a 2012 or a 2011 that you believe is in the top 68 in the province, by all means, visit the Up My Hockey website. UpMyHockey.com, there is what we call a watch list form. We do use our hockey network in all the provinces. We have people watching tournaments, games in league and out, and we compile lists of who we believe these top 68 players are. But of course, there's a lot of hockey players and there's a lot of geographic area to cover. So even if you feel well entrenched in the top 68 or well entrenched in the top 25, put your name in the hat. Just let us know that you are interested and you would like to come and experience what a UMH 68 is. If you are a coach or a parent of a player and you would like to refer your player or somebody on your team or elsewhere in your league, you can use the watch list form to do that as well. Recognize greatness in your community. Let's celebrate these players and let's give them an experience unlike any other in the spring. So really excited about the UMH 68. There is also sponsorship opportunities if you are in one of those geographic areas and you're a listener looking for provincial sponsors to get behind the UMH 68 to help keep costs low for these families that want to participate. That is a definite priority of mine, is to provide a world-class experience and still keep the fees low so everyone can attend and take advantage of what's there to offer. So if you are a corporate sponsor and want to get behind youth hockey, by all means, you can reach out at www.upmyhockey.com as well, or jason@upmyhockey.com to email me directly. And yeah, fantastic stuff going on with the UMH 68. Super excited. And till 2025, June and May is when these things are going to be happening. So anyways, let's get back to the podcast with Topher Scott.
I'll even take it a step further. Like, the kids that you work with are really lucky to have you to teach them that. And I said it before, like, thank God for my dad.
Yeah.
Thank God for my dad and giving me some blunt honesty, in that moment, because, what we're seeing nowadays is, the I think people call them snowplow parents, right? Where, they're plowing the snow in front of the kids so they don't have to walk through the crap, and they're kind of like trying so hard to make sure their kid doesn't have to have so much adversity. Because if my dad in that car ride home, if his reaction to me throwing myself a pity party was to be like, yeah, you know what? It's not fair. It's BS. I can't believe he said that to you. Like, this is brutal. And then he's going to call, somebody at USA Hockey and say, this is BS. Imagine if he did that. Like, the next year was one of the best. Like, I had a great, like, I worked really hard and I became a much better player because he's, instead of like enabling me and saying, yeah, you know what, this isn't in your control. And like, that's why it's so important that, like, we let the kids like figure it out and go through the tough stuff. We can be there to support and guide and everything like that. But like, how many youth coaches do or youth hockey directors that, their worst and least favorite time is right after tryouts? Because what do they have to do? They have to field all these calls from all these parents who feel like their kid got, the wrong end of the stick. Well, let's reframe that. Those parents, what they should be doing is, hey, I guess you're not good enough this year. Like, let's get to work. Like, let's prove them wrong and be the best player on your team this year. And let's make the team next year, or it's, this team didn't take me, so we're going to go to another organization. And then you see kids that play for 6 different organizations in 8 years. And then, when it gets to be time for junior hockey or college hockey or whatever, we're looking at the history and we're like, oh, whoa, this kid played on 6 different organizations in 8 years. Like, that's probably a big red flag. I don't know if I want to take a kid like that or from a family like that. So like, yeah, I think and especially as kids, we're immature and we haven't gone through some of the life stuff yet. And it's important that as adults, coaches, parents, administrators, people like yourself who are working with these athletes too, like we have to teach them this stuff and not, when the things aren't going well, just fight their battle for them. Let,
Yeah.
let them fight their battles and figure it out.
Well, and to if we're gonna give if we're gonna give parents any slack, I do think that the ones that are like we said, enabling, the snowplow, I think it's because they don't see the other option too. Like they themselves are stuck in these old habits, patterns. Like they themselves probably view their world in that capacity, right? That someone's
Yeah.
out to get me and it's not for me. So it's tough. I mean, I'm just saying it's tough to operate from a different lens if you haven't yourself seen that there's a potentially different option there. That's a more enabling and a more empowering one. Uh, when it comes to like, I like the honesty that you talked about there with your dad, just saying, hey, this is the way it is, right? Like you need to be better. Very similar conversation with my middle son, who's a 5'5.5" goalie right now at U15, playing the highest level he can play. His goalie partner is 6'1". It's the funniest thing you've ever seen, right? Like when they're standing beside each other on the ice. And we all know how favorably small goalies are looked at right now in this day and age, right? And so we've had the discussion, and I'm like, Gunnar, hey, first of all, hopefully you're doing this because you love it, not because you expect to be an NHL goalie, but like not having a conversation within the context of advancing through the sport. I'm like, you are going to have to be much better, like really good. Like you're gonna have to be a better skater. You're gonna have to have a higher save percentage. You're gonna have to do things that other guys don't have to do because you're smaller. So you can take, and he can take that whichever way he wants to take it. Right? He can
Yeah.
take that information and do what he wants with it. He can't control how much he's going to grow, but he can control how much he's going to work on his skating or how much he's going to compete or, all these other things that he's going to do. So personally, I like the rawness of what you're talking about there from your father, right? Like that you put this formula, this thing in front of them in real black and white terms, and then they can do something about it. The other thing that comes to mind, Toph, and you'll probably like this, is my son last year in his draft year, airing all the family stuff. I think that's fine. My kids know that I'm able to talk about them. I like talking about them better than my clients, so keep that a little more private. But he was really upset that he wasn't getting these surveys from WHL teams. It was about halfway through his draft year, right? And he'd only had two, and his other guys had X, Y, and Z, and all his teammates had all this recognition, and he felt that he wasn't getting what he deserved, right? That he was working hard and he was getting his points and doing his thing. And I said to him once, I said, "Howdy, do you want to like? What, do you know why you're not getting them?" "Well, no, I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's just so frustrating." And I'm like, "Because you can't frickin' skate." I'm like, "That's why." You need to be a better skater. I've talked to you about this before. And like, he's a kid that works his ass off in anything, right? But he had avoided those components of his own development, resistance there, that he wasn't really doing the things that would require him to be a better skater. And that moment in time was when he switched gears, because it meant enough to him. He met his own pain point, and then he started doing all the things that he could be doing: slide board, plyometrics, this, that, and the other, on his own time, deliberately, with intention, consistently. And his skating changed enough in the second half of the year that he was drafted in the 4th round. And it was
No
really
kidding.
like, yeah, it was like a
Yeah.
massive
There
game
you
changer
go.
for him. And he still needs to work on it. I mean, that's still his thing, but like that black and white honesty, he reached his point, and it was like, and then he did something with that information. So anyways, a couple of stories there for hopefully that motivates some kids out there that know, and parents, that the truth is okay, right? Because it now
Yeah.
gives us a new option.
Can I add something to that? Because I think this is really important too. Like I had a great relationship with my dad, to the point where he could be upfront and honest with me.
Yeah.
You have a great relationship with your son to the point where you can be honest with him and he's going to appreciate, the fact that you're being that honest with him. The relationship has to come before the honesty.
Yeah.
If you're a hockey parent or you're a hockey coach, that wants to give critical feedback to people, the kid has to know that you care about them before you can do that. If you don't, and you're that harsh with somebody, I think you're going to lose them.
Yeah.
um, and even though what you're saying potentially could be true, um, if it's some kind of constructive criticism or negative feedback or whatever, like, and you know this as a coach, like, again, it's the cliche thing. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so I think it's awesome that you have a relationship with your son where you can be honest with him, and he'll listen and he'll get to work, just like I had with my dad. But I've seen it with a lot of parents who are critical of their kids and their games, and it just goes in one ear and out the other, because the relationship from that they're like, Dad, I just want you to be a dad. Let my coach give me the feedback type stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important in this as well. Like, if you the care and the relationship has to come before the constructive criticism. I think that's a really important part of it
No,
too.
I'm glad you added to that for sure. The And I don't know how your dad was, or how, I mean, I just know how I am with, like, I'm not critical, like, unless they ask me for critique, like I'm pretty stand back. So like when I do say something like that, it's not that they're not hearing it 19 times a week and it just becomes noise. I mean, it's like once in a while if they want to hear it. So that's the way I kind of approach it. And the other thing I'll add to you, and to your point there for everyone listening, is sometimes you got to ask permission as a parent or as a coach. Do you want feedback about something that I think might give you some value?
Yeah.
Instead of just giving it and delivering it, they might not be ready for it, And so if they do say, "Yeah, I'd like to hear what you think about my game," now they've invited you to give them that. I think that changes that dynamic of that communication pretty substantially for a lot of players, and they're much more likely to receive it. I mean, if you respect what they're saying. Some might say, "No, I don't want to hear it," right? So I think that's a little point there too. If you're a mom or a dad or a coach, is like, ask the kid if he wants to hear.
Yeah, it was funny. I was talking with my dad about this literally last week. It's so funny that this came up, because we always had a rule in our car that if we were going to talk about hockey, I had to be the one to bring it up. And we were talking about it, and it was funny because I can't remember. I think I was maybe 11 or 12 years old. And my dad was telling me the story about how at one point I looked at him in the car and I was like, Dad, can we just stop talking about hockey right now? Can we talk about something else? And it was an aha moment for him. Like, I need to shut up, like, this is not the kind of hockey parent that I want to be. And so that was kind of the rule that him and my mom had in the car, is like, if we wanted to, or if I wanted to talk hockey, then let's do it. And my dad's played college hockey, like, he's been involved in the game for a long time, and so I value his opinion. But yeah, just really funny. And that's one thing we do a lot with the Hockey Think Tank. We do a lot of parent education stuff, and we really hammer home how important the car ride home is, and
Yeah, good
how
for
it's
you.
important to have a really good car ride home, positive support, love, and, just like you with our podcast, sometimes we get the opportunity to get these really high level hockey people on, guys have played in the NHL, women that have played in the Olympics and stuff. And we always ask them every time, what was your car ride home like? And we have yet to encounter a high level hockey player that has said it was a negative car ride home,
Right.
every single one. And it just, man, I feel like the car ride home for a kid's development is as much, maybe even more important than anything a coach can do on the ice to give you the hockey skills. That relationship is so important. And I honestly, you probably do too. Like, I know guys that I've played with who struggle to allow their dads to be around their grandkids because of the way that their dads treated them growing up when it came to
Right.
hockey. And they don't
Right.
want that for their kids.
Yeah.
And that's
It's sad.
that's that's tough.
Yeah.
Like, that's, so I ask parents, like, is that what you want? Like, what's your why here? Like, what do you want to get out of this situation with your kid here?
Yeah.
Because it's a longer game than just, the however many years that they're playing the game. And that's an unfortunate byproduct of a lot of parents that are maybe a little bit too harsh, or whatever you want to call it, with their kids, critical. Yeah, it's a big deal. The car ride home's a big deal.
I agree. I agree, man. I'm glad you mentioned personal development earlier. Like, I would consider myself a little bit of a geek about it. Yeah, I just, like, philosophically, I believe that we're here to evolve the best that we can in whatever capacity. That's kind of the way I've operated on a personal level, whether it be sports or, my coaching or whatever. It does not mean that I'm perfect in any capacity, but it means that I'm trying, and And I think that for me, the emotional IQ aspect of what you're talking about is something that we can grow. And I view all this stuff as skills. And I think if you're lacking in the emotional IQ department, I think that's when a lot of this stuff goes wrong, like in the car ride. Yeah, we want the hockey thing to be good and we're passionate about that. But if we don't recognize the emotional spot that the kid is in or the player, and then we come at them with an energy or in a way that like isn't productive, we're not doing anyone any favors, right? And now there's just hostility involved in there. And so I think, you know, doing some work as a parent or as a coach on that emotional IQ aspect and being able to, feel energy, understand it, what the personality type is in the car, I think is really important. And, it's definitely something that I'm growing with. But even as you were saying that, I was thinking like the last car ride home I had with Hudson, he had a weekend that he wasn't super happy with. As a parent watching, I wasn't super happy with it either. Details of the game, things that could have been happening. But he came into the car and I could tell he was like not happy. And I wasn't going to be a cheerleader for him either, right? It was just like, and it was just quiet. And it wasn't quiet in any type of negative, but he just didn't want to talk. And there was nothing for me to offer him in that scenario. So the silence was okay. It was just like, we just went. And then it was 3-4 hours later at the dinner table where he wanted to start talking about it, so then we started talking about it. And that was when he was ready, so I think it is a lot about when the player, I think, is ready and how they are. And hopefully we can allow them the space that they need and just give them a like free ride. Even if they don't want to talk about it, then it's not up to us to initiate that conversation. So yeah, really, really great points there. If we're going to shift gears back to you a little bit, I'd like to know a little bit more just about how you got in with the Steel and that experience of the USHL and playing that high of a level again at 5'4". Part of my coaching program includes a story from Nathan Gerby talking about his evolution through the game and how he ended up being the shortest position player ever at 5'4" to play in the NHL. So like, I love, there's not many of you, right? So how that happened, how you made that team, what type of fight you had to put up to get there. Can you walk us through some of that?
Yeah. So it was actually pretty crazy. Like, back when I was of that age, like, we didn't really know junior hockey, like, it wasn't really a thing down in the States yet. There was USHL, North American League, but like, we didn't really know what it was or whatever. And there was a team that moved from Fargo down to Chicago. The team got sold and then moved down to Chicago. And we had a team of 15-year-olds that the year before we won the national championship down here in the States. So we had a lot of really good players, and we all went to the tryout just to kind of, oh, hey, they invited us. It was like, yeah, let's see what it is. And I ended up like doing really well at the tryouts as a 15-year-old, and made the team from there, just kind of on a whim almost. And it's the really interesting part about it, kind of tying back to what we were talking about. It was the hardest year of hockey I've ever had in my life. Like, I am somebody that absolutely loved the game, still do, but like at that time, like that's all I thought about. I loved to play hockey, and I was close to quitting. I was legit close to quitting. I couldn't do it. Like, it was just, I was depressed. Like, it was the first time in my life where hockey was like not easy for me, like, and so, yeah. And again, thank God for my parents. I had great parents. Like, what's a positive? That's the thing they always talk to me about. What's a positive we can take out of this? What's a positive that we can take out of this? What's a positive we can take out of this? You're going to be better for it. Because I was like, I had conversations with them of like, I don't want to play this anymore. Like, can I just go play midget hockey with my buddies? Like, it's not fun for me. And they were like, nope, you made a commitment, stick it out. And if you still feel the same way after next year, then we'll make a decision, and so it was really hard. And that's why, like, I bang the drum, like, don't, and so many kids want to get to the next level as fast as possible, but like, no, like, go when you're ready, dominate your level before you move up to the next one. Over marinate is what a lot of scouts call it. Like, just really marinate, and development's a marathon and it's not a sprint. So like, my first year with the Steel was really, really hard, really, really hard. Eventually it ended up working out and I learned some things and figured it out. But it took me at 4 years. I played 4 years of junior hockey before I went on to college. And I needed all 4 of those years. My third year, I tore my ACL in the first game of the season. So it was kind of a lost year, but still, like, I needed that. That was another setback that if I don't have that, I don't know if I have the success, because I learned a lot of stuff going through that. So yeah, junior hockey is a different animal, as you know. And so I encourage kids all the time, like, there's no race to get there. Go when you're ready. Go when you're ready.
Wasn't that interesting though, right? Because in saying that, would you have undone that first year now? Because like
No,
that first year, yeah. So it
no.
kind of like that established you, gave you some identity, helped build that resilience piece, probably how you identify with yourself as being an underdog and being able to fight through things. Yet you're also saying that maybe to others that maybe you shouldn't go early.
Yeah, no, I don't. No, I don't think you should. I mean, granted, here, it's very good to be challenged, right? And to fail and that kind of thing. But I do feel like, especially at the junior hockey level, it's not only the hockey side of things, but it's the lifestyle that you have to live, and learning new things, and
Yeah.
being in a locker room with kids that are 4 years older than you for the first time, and hearing those conversations, and they're very different, than the conversations you have at 15, 16 years old. Right. So, yeah, I think you can still be challenged, but ripen up before you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, boy, that's such an interesting one. I've had that conversation before with a few people, and even like a guy like Jerome McGinley that I had on the podcast. At 16, he went to the Blazers, and very similar to what you were saying. Like wanted to go home at different points in the year. He wasn't playing. He was, the way the ecosystem worked there, and the culture was that 16-year-olds, got 3 shifts in the first and 2 in the second, and if the game was in reach, then they wouldn't play in the third. Now, should Jerome McGinley have been somewhere else scoring a ton of goals in midget? I mean, I don't know, right? Like, I'm sure he probably would have worked out fine either way. But that experience and being part of that Blazer culture set him up for a really, really good 17-year-old year. Now, maybe that culture is different in a different organization, and it doesn't actually foster growth and development, right? And maybe Jerome McGinley, if he's wired a little differently from a personality standpoint, maybe he doesn't have that type of response to it. So I do, yeah, I mean, I love what you're saying there, because I've definitely recommended some players to not go when they've been asked. And I do think that the mentality, let alone the physicality, like the mentality of the player is really, really important when you're considering what you're going to do.
And the support system of that player too.
Yeah.
If I had
Yeah.
different parents, I'm probably out of hockey at 16.
Right.
Or I don't go on this trajectory that I went on,
Yeah.
So yeah, the mental makeup of the player, the emotional makeup of the player, the EQ, like you talked about, the support system. And that's why, development is such a fun thing to talk about, and because there's not a manual for it. There kind of is, but every situation, every kid, everybody's different. Right. So like, um, that's why having these conversations are great, because you can look at things from 2 different perspectives, and there's not one right way, there's not one wrong way, but you can take where the situation that you're in and learn from other people's stories, and have a little bit more of a perspective, so you can make some judgments and some moves on your own.
Yeah, I think the mental intangibles that we talked about earlier are really important. Like if those kids have the tools of what we were discussing earlier, and you now are in that very hard, difficult environment, and you're viewing that hard, difficult environment as your opportunity to really shine and to showcase and to fight through and do these things, like that changes your experience in that environment too,
Right.
right? And so I do think that's relevant to the discussion. Well, how did you end up with a C on your chest after, 4th year there? Yes, coaches love to give, letters to guys that have been in their organization for a while, but it was after the year that you said you had a torn ACL. It wasn't like you were lighting the lamp. It looks like when you were in the lineup. Uh, what in your opinion was how you were given that honor?
Well, for that year, it was actually my coach that gave it to me. And my second year with the Steel, we had an assistant coach. His name was Will Nickel. And then he became the head coach. He left to do a prep school thing for a year, and then he came back to be the head coach my 4th year. And having known me that second year that he coached with us, he basically gave it to me before the season. Which I've always been a believer that the players should vote the captains. But I was obviously honored to get that. And Will, so he's the director of player development for the Vegas Golden Knights now. He actually invited me up to his Stanley Cup party. Like, that's the kind of guy he is. Like, he still keeps in touch with his players, even in junior hockey. And obviously I'm in the game and was in college hockey, so we would see each other at rinks and stuff like that. But yeah, that's kind of how it happened. And he's one of the best coaches, one of the best leaders I've ever had. So even thinking about it now as we're having this conversation, like, real big honor that he entrusted me in that, because he's a guy that is very into leadership development, and building, obviously, not just good players but good people, and he's the best. He's the best. So yeah, that's how it happened. Yeah.
What maybe we can talk about that for a little bit, because I have players, as you do. People like to be recognized. They want to be leaders, and there's definitely skills that are involved in that. And I think leadership skills do change as you go through the ranks. Like you being a captain of a junior team is going to be different than you being captain of a college team, and it's going to be different than being a captain of your bantam team. Sort of what is expected of you, or what you think you do well. What do you see? Maybe we'll start with that, with the youth environment. If you're a coach, or even if you're a player out there, like, what attributes, what do you think allows a player to be a C or an A in a youth organization?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, you lead with your actions first and not your words. So you're putting yourself in a much better situation to have a leadership role on the team if you're one of the hardest working players out there. A lot of times in youth hockey, I feel like coaches just give the C or the A to the best player, which isn't necessarily reinforcing the best things, even if that player is, really skilled and talented, but maybe they're only about themselves, or, whatever. I feel like just the work ethic side of things is really important. And then, like, honestly, does this person just care about the thing on the front of the jersey more than the thing on the back? That for me is everything. You got to be playing for something bigger than yourself, and understanding that, and leading through actions of, this is what's best for the team. That goes a long way. That goes a long way. As you get older, I feel like one of the most important attributes of a leader is just authenticity, being yourself. I think a lot of leaders, myself included, I'll raise my hand up there. Once you get that C or once you get that A, you kind of feel like you got to be somebody different. When in reality, you're getting that because you deserve it, because of who you are. And so, a captain, I always say this, like, a coach is only as good as his leadership, and the leadership's only as good as the secondary leadership. So, like, everybody plays a part in it. Everybody plays a role. Even if you're a strong leader, but you don't have great secondary leadership with you, like, it's more about a leadership team than anything else, than just one, because everybody's different. There's going to be times when maybe you're a leader that doesn't like to say much in the room. You just kind of lead by example, but there's some times where somebody's got to step up and say something and be like, hey, this is how it's got to be. There's going to be times where the team's not playing well, and you need a leader to kind of be a bit of a jokester and stand up and say, hey, we're like, crack a joke and ease the tension of a room. Leaders come in all different shapes and sizes, and just being the best version of yourself, I think, is a big piece of that. But going back to it, you have to work. Like, you have to be a really hard worker, number one, and you have to care about your team, and your teammates.
Just going to take one more short break with Topher to share the ambassador program, or the affiliate coach program, available at Up My Hockey. There has already been so many awesome, qualified, passionate people that have reached out, that want to be a part of Up My Hockey, want to help players all across North America to be their best, and believe that mindset is a key component in high performance. So I'm super grateful for those of you who have already said, hi, hey, I want to be involved. What's this all about? And I want to extend an invite elsewhere. Maybe you are hearing this for the first time. Maybe this is your call to action. If you live somewhere in North America, Actually, it doesn't even have to be North America. Why am I restricting the borders there? Hockey is growing everywhere. If you're a listener in the United Kingdom, in Finland, in Sweden, if you believe that mindset is a key component to development and to high performance, and you'd like to be involved with Up My Hockey in some capacity, whether it's supporting the programs already available, or whether it is being an assistant or associate coach at some point, then by all means, reach out to jason@upmyhockey.com and let me know you are interested. The idea with this is to grow the Up My Hockey programs, to grow the availability of mindset training to athletes everywhere and give them the power that they deserve. Confidence is a thing that can be built. High performance and the approach to the long game with development is something that these players can learn and adapt, and it is so freaking amazing when they do. It's such a gratifying thing to be a coach. I'm thankful every day for the people that I get to touch and work with, and make a difference for them. And if that speaks to you, if you are out there and if you are somebody that already works with athletes, if you are somebody that's involved in coaching in some capacity, want to expand your game as a coach, then by all means, if you are passionate about player development, you are in the right spot. So once again, jason@upmyhockey.com or the upmyhockey.com website, where you can fill out a contact form and let me know that you'd like to either be an ambassador or an associate coach, and I can walk you through what those steps are, and we can meet face-to-face on a Zoom. So yes, thank you to those of you who are there. Thank you those of you who are making a difference already in your areas. Without you coaches and without you people who want to inspire and motivate these young athletes, the game wouldn't be in the place it is right now. So awesome job to all of you out there who are doing what you do. This is coming out at Christmas time, so I am grateful for all you listeners out there that have given Up My Hockey your attention and have used the downloads and have subscribed wherever you listen. I really do appreciate the support. Hopefully this episode and others are something that you are gaining education from, knowledge from, reasons to have discussions with your players. And that's really the idea, is to give back to a game that's given me so much. So thank you so much for being here. Merry Christmas, everybody. Happy holidays. And now let's get back to the conversation with Topher Scott. There's two things there that I want to touch on. One is like the vocal aspect of being a leader. And I think it gets misconstrued at the younger age groups, that people feel that they need to be the guy saying something in the room. I personally think that that's the last thing anyone needs to worry about at Adam or Pee Wee or Bantam or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's generally the coach's job, because that's the part where it can, like, the leadership can get cringy sometimes. Like, they feel you have to say something, and it's like this rah speech that you see in a movie, not necessarily required. Like I say, lead yourself through actions, right? Like be really committed to what you want to do, your goals, and when you're committed to that and that shows up in your actions, you are standing out, because not everybody's doing that. So you're being a great leader by example. And then celebrate others. Like, if you can do those two things, that you celebrate the success of other people in your locker room, whether they score, whether it's a hit, a back check, something in the weight room, and you're one of those guys that is shining a light on other people, they feel good about themselves. Like, that is vocal enough, right? And I think that also speaks to what you're talking about caring about the team. It's not necessarily another thing that I hear. I don't know if you hear it, but like, worried if somebody's feeling down, to go over there and pat them on the back. Like, I'm not saying that's a negative thing. That's a great thing to do. But you also, sometimes when you're down, you just want to be down, right? Like, you just need a second to be by yourself, right? If you can celebrate them in a way that encourages them, that is more in a positive aspect, don't worry about being a counselor, or don't worry about doing anything else. Like, I think it simplifies it for kids sometimes. How do you feel about what I just threw out there?
Oh, it's so true. I have a great story on that too. So one of the first people we ever had on our podcast actually was a guy named George Gwozdecki.
Okay.
And I don't know if you know Gwaz, but he coached college hockey at the University of Denver for a long time, won national championships there. And one of the stories that he told us was when he was an assistant coach at Michigan State. He was out recruiting, and this was years ago, out recruiting at Notre Dame out in Wilcox, Saskatchewan. They had a great program out there.
Yeah.
And he was going to watch Rod Brindamore. For those, I'm sure most people know who that is, but for those that don't, he's the head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes right now. He's been a captain in the NHL, won a Stanley Cup, probably going to win a Stanley Cup as a head coach. He's that good. But he goes out there to watch Rod Brindamore play, and he's watching him play, and obviously he's really talented and things like that. And then he goes, Rod Brindamore, first period, he scores a goal, and he just kind of raises his stick like it was no big deal. Hey, I scored a goal, whatever. And then he continues to watch the game. He's like, yeah, he's a pretty good player, this and that. And then he's on the ice, and one of his teammates scored a goal, and the guy acted like he won the Stanley Cup. Like his celebration for when his teammate scored, as opposed to the celebration of when he scored, he was like, that told me a lot about him right there. And I knew right then that we were going to commit to him. And what do you know? He commits to Michigan State, goes there. There's the whole, thing about Rod Brindamore getting the keys to the weight room and or them having to lock him out of the weight room and stuff like that when he was there. But it's those intangible things, right, that really make a leader. And it's no surprise that Rod Brindamore is the head coach of the NHL and was a captain of a Stanley Cup winning team, because that stuff is important. And so that hopefully reiterates and drives your point home. The celebrating your teammates is it goes a long way as a leader, no question.
I love that. Yeah, what a great story. And it is. So we can talk about that. This is the thing where I try to get my athletes to understand. We can talk about actions, right? So a kid could go to a game now and celebrate others. But it could be a little bit of a forced action, let's say, because he's trying to look good and he's trying to be a teammate, but he actually hasn't seen the reason why he should, right? And when you can explain why you should, like that there is value in the element of success. Like there is clues in that success. One, you can like find lessons in his success. The positivity you're going to be showing him is something that's going to make you feel, as a chemistry related scenario in your body, better about yourself. Their success does not diminish your potential for success at all.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's so many things when you're talking with players, and I know you've seen it, is that's one of the big ones, is like, we're in a competitive environment, even on a team, like whether it's with your peer group or not, that you want to be able to stand out because you want to advance. So somebody else doing well can feel like unsafe almost, right? Like we like this is hampering me. But the reality of it, that it isn't. Like their success can be your success and then some. And so to reframe that again, to use your words, right, to allow them to see it through a different lens, so now they can authentically really believe that the celebration of somebody else is not only benefiting them and the team, but it's also benefiting themselves from an individual performance standpoint, can be like the real breakthrough.
One of the best lessons that I learned, and this is coming from Will Nickel, my coach with the Chicago Steel, who made me captain. It came from him, and that was that individual success comes from team success. It's not the other way around. And the better you do as a team, the more individual success each one of you are going to have too. And I'll never forget our first day in the rink as a team with the Steel that year. We get up into the conference room, everybody's sitting around a big table, and we're going to go through all of our values and systems and structure and all that kind of stuff. And first thing that coach did is he came around the table and he put a pamphlet down in front of all of us, right? This little pamphlet, about 4 or 5 sheets of paper. And on the pamphlet, it showed the amount of college commitments that each team in the USHL had the year before. And this was, early 2000s, when you kind of went to junior hockey to get a commitment rather than kind of like getting it and then going to junior hockey. And so his point, so he kind of asked us, he was like, which teams have the most college commitments? And we were like, well, the teams that were at the top of the standings last year. And he's like, that's right, because scouts want winners, and scouts want team guys, and teams that win have more team guys. And so the better we do as a team collectively, and the more you all buy into what we're doing, the more individual success you guys are going to have as players. And if you guys want to do things your own way, or you don't buy in, we're not going to have success as a team. And just look at the data here. Which teams have the most individual success? It's the ones that have the most team success. And it was a really interesting way to kind of go about it. And I'll never forget that, because it is so true. When you get to be a part of a team, especially when you get older, you have to rely on your teammates a lot. And that's why a lot of, junior hockey franchises aren't very good, They bring in me people who just want to get to the next level. That's why a lot of NHL teams can't get over the hump, is because they got too many me guys and not enough we guys. And because there's money involved and it's a business, and the teams that are the tightest and the teams that play to their structure the best are typically the teams that win. And so yeah, I love what you said there. Like the individual success comes after the team success.
Yeah. Oh, that's
It's not
perfect.
the other way around.
There's yeah, and it comes up time and time again, even at the pro level. The AHL champions. Look how many guys signed that are free agents that'll get signed from those teams, right?
How
Like
much
it
more
has,
money do guys get after winning a Stanley Cup when they're free agents?
yeah,
They basically double their salary because
yeah.
people want people who know how to win and
Yeah,
can
it
do that.
shows up again and again and again. And to all the really good players out there in their team, the one message I try and get them to understand is like being a really good player is different than being a great player. And the great players do make the people around them better as well. And,
Totally.
and I think that shows up at the NHL level too. Who has ever played with Sidney Crosby that hasn't scored 40 goals, right? Or had a career year or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Like these guys make everyone good. And I think that's a cool challenge. Like as a good player out there to have that challenge. I mean, how can I make so and so better? How can I make this line work? How do I get somebody else involved? I think that's pretty cool. Oh, I want to, you mentioned about authenticity, and for me, I love that topic because I believe that when a player is understanding who they are as a person and how that shows up and is reflected on the ice, that is when they're going to play their best. Because a lot of times in a team environment, we get it's not necessarily a conscious, rational peer pressure scenario, but we feel we have to act a certain way, right? And this way that we're supposed to act may not be conducive to how we're actually going to play our best. For example, right, being really serious in the locker room before a game starts might not be the way that guy really is going to prepare to be his best. Maybe he needs to be a little bit looser, standing up, right, dancing to the music, something like that. So something as simple as that might help a player. Now you're talking about being a captain and authentically being you, yet trying to be a captain at the same time, right? Because you're thinking that maybe something has to change. Can you just walk like your own personal experience with that? Maybe where you showed up a little differently, maybe how, as you went through that process, how you learned to understand yourself more and be the best captain you could be within your own skin?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different facets to that. I do think that, like, when I became a captain at Cornell, at the time, we had kind of some like off ice discipline issues. Like, we had a couple guys that didn't buy in, a couple guys were probably a little too social, and we had kind of a down year the year before after 2 championship years, and it just wasn't right in the locker room. Like, it just that the chemistry wasn't there, and there wasn't everybody wasn't all in, let's just say.
Yeah.
And so I took it upon myself as a captain to kind of be a hard ass. And if guys weren't doing things in a certain way, it was, getting into them in a tough way and things like that. And that is not who I am at all. I'm a positive person. That's kind of my personality, high energy type stuff. And I was kind of playing this character out of the goodness of my heart. Like, I wasn't trying to be an asshole, but like I felt like that's what I needed to do to get guys to kind of get on the straight and narrow again. And I lost. It's one of my biggest regrets, honestly, that I have in my hockey career, is how I started as a captain when I did that. And again, luckily, again, it goes back to your support group. I had a couple guys be like, dude, what are you doing? Like,
Right.
enough with the act, man. Like, and again, this was a group where we voted for captains, and the players on the team voted me as a captain, and they voted me as a captain because I was a certain way. And then when I became a captain, I became somebody different instead of being the guy that, earned it by how I lived my life. And so I changed. I had to change. And so rather than kind of like looking for things that guys were doing wrong, it was like, okay, like, let's look for things that guys are doing right. And if they did do something wrong, it was taking them out to lunch the next day and, hey, let's have a conversation about it. Hey, is everything okay? And this is how we do things here, instead of, getting into them and, I don't want to say yelling at them, but like, just harshly doing things, which is not authentic to me. Right. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it was a great learning experience. And I had a similar learning experience as a coach too. All the coaches that I had growing up were kind of like strong, authoritarian, disciplinarian type coaches. That's what I knew. And so when I became a coach, I kind of got into that. And again, same thing. Like I had a couple players come up to me and be like, "You're kind of losing guys right now. We know this isn't you. Like, what's up?"
Right.
And so same thing, I had to change. And same, like, rather than looking for things that guys were doing wrong, it was looking for things doing right. And um, you just gotta be yourself. You just gotta be yourself as a leader. You're when you're more you, people tend to gravitate. Like, and I know for me, and I think we even talked about this when you came on our podcast. Like, the thing that I hate the most from guys that coach me were when I thought they were playing an angle, and they were not necessarily being upfront and honest and truthful with what they were saying. They were trying to play an angle, mind game, whatever you want to call it. And that's what can come off when you're not yourself. Is
Yeah.
you can come off that way. And so, yeah, you gotta be you. That doesn't mean you can't change and be better and develop your skills as a coach and learn new ways of doing things. But like, you gotta act true to who you are.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad I asked that question. Love that.
And I have another thing too that I think is relevant to this. Sorry, I don't know if you
No,
had
rock
another
and
question
roll.
right after that, but like, I think the same goes true as a player. You have to understand who you are as a player. And I'll never forget the conversation I had my year after I left coaching at Cornell. I went up, they made the ECAC finals up in Lake Placid that next year. And so I went up there to go watch the game. And I'll never forget the night before. I'm at the hotel and I go down to eat in the hotel bar. And Scott Young, who, if people don't know, he's in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame, played in the Olympics, kind of just a really good American player. And at the time, he was a director of player development for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we had a kid that was drafted at the Penguins on our team, so he was there to kind of watch him or whatever. And he was just kind of sitting there eating dinner alone, and so I went up to him and I said, "Hey," and we just kind of sat there and just talked hockey for about an hour, eating dinner and stuff. And I remember one of the questions I asked him. I was like, "All right, so you're director of player development. You're with the AHL team a lot. You're with the NHL team a lot. Like, what makes a guy stick? Like, what's the difference between a guy that comes up to the NHL and stays, versus a one that kind of keeps going up and down. They can't quite figure it out." And I'm expecting him to say, commitment or hockey sense or competitiveness, something to that effect. And his answer blew me away, but it was so just profound. And he was like, "You know what it is? It's self-awareness." I was like, "Huh, what do you mean by that?" He's like, "Honestly, I think the players that stick, they know exactly who they are. They know what their strengths are. They play to their strengths. They know exactly what their role is that's on this team. They buy into that. And it's just an unbelievable self-awareness that they have. Most of the guys that go up and down, they're trying to be somebody that they're not. They think they should be a skilled guy, but they're being asked to play a third line center role, and they play as a skilled guy, but that's not what they need at the top level. Or they're not playing to their strengths in some capacity. And so when he said self-awareness, it kind of surprised me, because I was thinking about all these other things. But man, does that make a lot of sense. Does that
Mhm.
make a lot of sense? And you've lived that life. And so I'll ask you, like, do you think that is something that, from what you've seen in your experience and being in that level and seeing guys go up and down and you having done that yourself, like, would you say that that's pretty accurate?
That's wild. Yeah. I mean, as you're saying that, I was thinking, because I was a guy that was up and down and then never stuck. It's funny because it's actually been a recent topic in our house that my middle son has actually got into my own career along with
Oh,
some of,
really?
yeah, like they could have really given a shit, right, for the most part. But like recently they've been talking about it, I guess, amongst their team and stuff. And, like,
You played in the World Juniors?
yeah,
What?
and what happened? And like
Oh,
that's the question.
no.
Like what happened? Like why only 41 games? So like I could like you're totally speaking to me. So I was like self-awareness, which is one of the things that I think is an absolute cornerstone of what I'm trying to get kids to understand too, right? Their own personal operating manual. Who are you? How do you do it? And how do you do it best? Like those are really great questions to answer. In my situation, probably, sure. Like I think I probably needed to know more uh, about who I was. The who I was part, I think, is a bigger question for me, not necessarily the player that I was. I think that in a hockey locker room, me being an introvert naturally, like I love this conversation right now, but if you put 17 other people in this room, I probably don't want to have it quite as much. Like I like deep one-on-one discussions. So you go in a hockey locker room, I'm automatically a little bit off from a natural setting, and then I felt like I had to be some type of personality, some type of actor in that environment. So whether that showed up socially, outside of the game or in the locker room, I felt that was never really comfortable, at the NHL level. So I think me having more self-awareness in that environment socially would have given me a much better chance to maybe play some better hockey on the ice. So there's that angle. The other thing I would say that I'm all about accountability for sure. There's a personal level of accountability in everything, but I do wish that I had a clear message of what they wanted from me when I got called up to.
That was
Um,
literally the next thing that I was going to say, because I know so many players who've said the same thing,
yeah,
particularly AHL, NHL. I wish they would have just told me,
yeah,
and that's a really good lesson for coaches to have. Like, you have to have consistent feedback with your players. And I mean,
yeah.
I think the best coaches, if you ask a player, particularly when they get to the levels that you played at, who their favorite coaches were and why, a lot of them was, I always knew where I stood, you know,
Mhm.
um, for the good or the bad. I always knew what was expected me, and what, where I stood. And so I think that what you just said is so important for coaches to hear. Um, because you probably have a lot of guys that too. I have so many friends in this game that do say that too. Like, I wish I would have known what the expectation was going in.
Yeah.
I would have played to it.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, and because I mean, sometimes I was too coachable, to be honest. Like I remember, like Mike Murphy at one point in my little stint with Toronto when I first got traded there, about 5 games in or 6 games in, he pulled me aside in the Maple Leaf Gardens, and he had this big discussion with me about playing better defense, and that I needed to be more responsible defensively. Now, first of all, was that true? Like I was actually kind of shocked a little bit at the time hearing that, but then at the same time, this is the NHL, and if this is what they want from me, then I better do it. And but for me, being like very literal, I was on top of every puck. I was always on the defensive side of whoever. And then so for me, was I in scoring positions? Was I using my intuition on transition? Was I using my natural abilities with my speed to get on the heels of defenders when that opportunity was there? Well, no, I wasn't, right? So and then I wasn't producing or didn't produce as much. So was he asking me to do something that he actually wanted me to do, or did I over deliver on that to my own detriment potentially, right? Like,
Mm,
so there's so much nuance to that too, right? Of like what it is they want.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, if you put me in a third line role, I felt that I was big and strong enough to definitely go and crash bodies and do that. Like I was willing to do that. If you put me up top and play me with Sedin and Clark, let me know what role you want me to play on that line. Do you want me to just go and create turnovers, or do you want me to be a guy that maybe is going to get the puck in the slot and be able to bury one, right? Like I was kind of somebody that wanted a little bit more information, whereas some guys don't want that information too, right? So I think that it's tough when you're 20, 21 years old, or if you're in a junior environment where there's so much personalities involved in it, right? Like, how do you learn? What do you need to be successful? That I think that's where these master coaches come in, is like they're really good at understanding that, right? That somebody comes in, he needs to know information. Allow him the space to ask questions, give him honest answers. This guy's going to do better. This guy needs to be left alone, right? I'm just
Mhm.
going to let him go. He's going to do his thing. The more information I give him, the more he slows down, because now he starts thinking too much, right? Like I do think that there is a role to play. So I mean, to backtrack, yes, there's personal accountability on the player, 100%. You have to feel empowered and you have to feel like it's your path, but what you're surrounded by is definitely impactful for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Coaching is an art, not a science, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
when you're dealing with people in any capacity, there's no manual. Like,
Yeah.
everybody's different, and you got to figure that stuff out. And the best coaches, they have a gift with understanding the nuances of every player, and how that ties into the team aspect of what you're trying to do. And a season, going back to the authenticity part, like a season would be really boring if you had 20, 25 of the same person.
Oh yeah.
It would be a really boring season. So
Yeah.
celebrating, and I think it's changed from when we were younger, it was conform to this. And now I think a lot of what coaching has become is, hey, we want to create an environment where everybody can be themselves.
Yeah.
We want everybody to be different. We're going to celebrate that stuff, and we're going to need your differences at different times, but within the confines of what we believe in as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. You mean from a skill standpoint, right? Like what do you bring to the team from an actual hockey player standpoint, and also what do you bring to the team from your human standpoint? What do
Yeah,
you bring to that locker room? Scott
totally.
Nickel, I had him on director of player development, assistant GM with the Predators. Awesome guy. I had to play with him. He was my captain in Detroit in the IHL one year, and we battled against each other in the dub lots. And he had one of the best lines ever that made me laugh. He's like, "I don't want 20 milk drinkers on a team, and we're not trying to find them either. Like you need those personality types, as you're saying. You need differences. It allows that family to grow. I think you can learn from each other, and it keeps things fresh. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great message from our podcast for players out there. I mean, just really find who you are, believe that what you are is enough, emphasize your strengths, provide value to the team, and don't try to be something else, because it usually comes off as inauthentic. And yes, there is room to grow, to your point. I'm all about that. But you find your home, you find your roots, and you kind of go from there. So
Well, let me ask you this: with the work that you do, because that word "enough," I feel like is a really hard one for me, and I think a lot of people who are high achievers, it can always be better.
yeah,
We're always we're always trying to find that edge. We can always be the one to outwork. It's why we are successful at the end of the day, because we're not satisfied. But that can lead to some some problems too, right? Like there's, for a lot of those people, myself included, I'll put myself on the therapist couch right now. It's like it's, for me, it's never enough. Like there's
yeah.
always something else that I could be doing. How do you kind of work with athletes that have that kind of mentality where, like, this is a strength of yours? You always want to be better. You're always looking for accountability. You're going to outwork that person next to you no matter how hard they work. But also, like, there's got to be some space in there to understand that you're enough,
Yeah.
and you're good just the way you are. How do you work with players from that capacity?
Well, the enough part from a human standpoint, if that's where you're going, I think is really important. And I think that, someone like yourself, a high achiever, hopefully they can look in the mirror and see that what they're doing, how they are operating, process oriented, committing to what they're willing to commit to, and how they're driving their own lives, and how they're driving that ship is really something to be proud of, and allowing them to see that. Like, that's something that I try and emphasize with every player that I work with, is to recognize the good that they are doing, that they are offering. Well, the first question I ask players all the time when I'm working at the start of our call, whether it's group or otherwise, is, what are you proud of? Because when do we get asked that question? And when do we allow ourselves those moments to celebrate our own success? Right. So
Never.
yeah, right. Because we don't. And especially someone like you or someone like me, like, I'm not looking at that. I'm never giving myself pats in the back. I'm looking for the next thing, right? The thing that I got to do, the thing that I gotta get better at. But it is good to allow yourself the place and the time to say, hey, I did well here. I did well here. I'm proud of this. So that's part of it, right? Is recognizing the journey, recognizing the things that you are doing, that you're accomplishing, where you are providing value. Like those are really good questions, right? Like, and to be able to answer those. So hopefully that comes to a spot where, hey, I am enough. Yes, I want to be more, but I am enough. Inherently, I'm doing things that are providing value, and I'm being a benefit, and I can feel good about that. The other thing is with, like, real high achievers, and honestly, I don't meet too many of them, like David Goggins type of people, like, that are really going too much, because I think that, like, I do believe in his philosophy of, like, we're operating at about 40%, most of us. And the ones that are really high achievers are probably more like 60, 65%, like, there's not many guys that are really pushing the envelope, I think, with how much you can do, and places you can do to get there. So in the few exchanges that I have had with that, I always try and position things in in levels of competition, because I think that speaks to the people that I'm usually working with. We're usually really competitive individuals naturally that see things as competition. And I say lean into where you're uncomfortable. I know that you love using that as well. So if it's uncomfortable for you, really uncomfortable for you to actually take a break for a day from training and go fishing or go golfing or do whatever, like that's your pain point. Like that's where the lesson for you lives, because that's harder for you to do. So find your space, find that place that you need to remove yourself from the action, and that's probably where your greatest growth is going to be found. So like I try and position those types of decisions, that they're now going to maybe step away, take a break, take a breath, because they know it's hard.
I love that. That's great. Yeah. It's uncomfortable to take a break every once in a while,
Isn't it?
but that's where growth lies. I like that. Yeah.
Sometimes that's where it lies, right? So anyways, we've thanks, man. Like hour and 20. Fantastic stuff. I know my listeners are gonna really find value in everything you had to offer there. I love how story driven you are there too. I really, that's one thing I personally noted. I think stories are awesome. People can learn more. It's more engaging, the storytelling aspect. So I love that you have so many great memories like that you're able to share. Super compelling. So yeah, man, thanks. I'm sure our paths will cross again, but anything you want to leave anyone with that you haven't been able to touch on or talk about yet?
No, not really. I mean, just be the best version of you, don't compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Just get a little bit better. Just treat people a little bit better.
I love that.
Like we live in a world where it's very easy to compare ourselves to other people. And what was that saying? I forget who it was. Like comparison is the thief of joy or something like that. Some philosopher said that. But yeah, I appreciate the time. This was awesome. It certainly didn't feel like an hour and a half. And those are always the best conversations, the one that fly by. Time flies when you're having fun. So,
and you know what? I'm going to extend it even more. Sorry to cut you off, but I
Yeah.
wanted to give us an opportunity to talk a little bit about the think tank. So like, what is the Hockey Think Tank? I know it's a podcast because I was on it, but like, what service are you providing, and how can someone, benefit from what you're doing right now? Who's out there
no, thanks. So we're an organization that work with a lot of youth hockey organizations all over North America. And we do everything from helping to provide, kind of like structural, operational type things, codes of conduct, just better ways to operate your organization. We do a lot of coaching education. We actually do like a weekly coaches call for every team that works with us. They can hop on a call every Tuesday and just talk some hockey with everybody. We do a lot of parent education. I would say probably the best feedback we get from everyone that we work with, every club, is like the parent education that we do. Just helping them to enjoy the youth hockey journey with their kids and give them a little bit of a perspective on what the journey potentially could look like. We do a lot of we focus a lot with the players on life skills, leadership and life skills. We try to equip the coaches with the hockey stuff and then try to equip the kids with the life stuff. And so it's been fun. We've been doing it for about a year and a half now. And we have 16 organizations that we work with at this point. And you learn a lot. From coming in as a college coach and kind of understanding and asking a lot of questions and learning about the youth hockey landscape. A lot of it, honestly, frankly, is scary. I don't really love where the game's going at the youth levels in a lot of different capacities. But there's a lot of really good people in hockey, and to be able to give back and share our knowledge and help some youth organizations operate and help their coaches and players and parents get better. It's been a lot of fun. A lot of fun, to say the least.
Awesome. Yeah. Applause for me. That's great. We need more of you. That's fantastic. Cause I agree. I mean, it's going a direction that I don't really like. It's a game that you and I both love and are super passionate about. And I think in our own way, we're trying to make that experience better for everybody, and pave the path that more people can fall in love with it and have good experiences with it. So thanks for doing that. That's hockeythinktank.com. Again, the podcast is really awesome. It's very, development focused. I think if you like my podcast, you'll definitely like the Hockey Think Tank, and lots of services there to that are offered. So Topher, thanks again, man. You're a star. Really appreciate the conversation and love what you're doing out there.
You too, Jason. Thanks a ton.
Thank you so much for being here and listening to the entire conversation with Topher. He's easy to listen to. I know I found him easy to have a discussion with, and lots of value in there. Topher, you can check him out at the Hockey Think Tank podcast. They're doing a lot of great things over there, him and Jeff Lovecchio. So by all means, if you were drawn to his message and what he has to offer, and if you are in a capacity at an academy or an association, and you are looking to make a difference with the framework of your development and the way you set culture and these types of things, then the Hockey Think Tank is some place that you want to check out there online. Topher's very active in the hockey community out on the East Coast there, as well as Jeff, and doing a great job in supporting the development of athletes all over the region. So thank you so much for being here again. Please come back again next time. We're trying to get an episode out a week now. It is challenging, but I am doing my best, finding some great guests and delivering a lot of action-packed, information-based programming for all you out there. So awesome stuff. Enjoy your holidays. I hope you get some time to relax with your family, with your friends, and just kick back. Maybe away from a hockey rink. Maybe it's an ODR type of holiday where we don't have to chase around practices and development ice, and we can just relax and be grateful for those around us and enjoy this holiday season. So until next time, play hard and keep your head up.